All right, today we are diving into a really big idea, something so fundamental we almost never think to question it. And that's the belief that without some kind of centralized control, without rulers, the world would just dissolve into chaos. But what if that's not just wrong? What if it's the complete opposite of the truth? This explainer is going to flip that entire assumption on its head. So let's get right into it. And here it is, the core claim that's going to guide us through this whole thing. I mean, just think about that for a second. What if the things we've been taught to label as evil aren't evil at all? What if they're just the basic, unchangeable laws of reality itself, forces that simply refuse to be controlled? So, okay, let's start with what the source material calls the lie we're told. This is all about why so many of us have this built-in fear of nature, of anything that feels untamed. The argument here is that this fear is no accident. It's an idea that's been planted, and it serves a very specific purpose. I mean, this is the bedrock of pretty much everything, right? Our politics, our religions, even our schools. The story is always the same. Authority is what creates order, and without it, you get chaos. It's a story that's been repeated for thousands of years, so, it feels like an obvious truth. But is it really? And just look at the pattern in what gets called evil in so many ancient myths and stories. Fire, floods, the deep wilderness, even mythological figures like giants and serpents. And get this, emergence itself, the very idea of things just coming into being on their own. None of these things are actually, morally bad. Their one defining feature, they can't be commanded. They are lawful, natural forces that just don't answer to a king on a throne. Okay, to really get what's going on here, we have to make a super important distinction. The source material says there are basically two completely different kinds of order, what it calls law versus command. And this really lays it all out. On the one hand, you've got cosmological law. This is the law of reality itself. It's built in, it's unchangeable. It just describes what is. But then, on the other hand, you have state law. This stuff is imposed from the outside by some authority. It can be broken, it definitely changes, and it's all about telling you what you should do. The great inversion, the big lie, happens when we mistake the law on the right for the fundamental law on the left. Think about gravity. It's the perfect example, right? Gravity doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't punish you for being disobedient. It just is. It's part of the fabric of reality. You can't break the law of gravity. You can only find out what happens when you ignore it. That is cosmological law in action. It's a description of how things work, not some rule book that needs enforcing. Now, the source brings in this really cool Hebrew concept called echad to show us what gets lost when we make this inversion. Echad is all about relational unity, this idea that things we see as separate, like law and life, aren't actually separate at all. They're just different expressions of the same one single reality. So by separating them, by putting them in different boxes, we end up fragmenting our whole understanding of the world. So let's see how this actually plays out in a story you might already know, the Norse myth of the primordial giant Ymir. The source presents this as more than just a cool creation story. It's seen as powerful evidence for this whole idea. And this is the absolute key to unlocking it. We have to completely reframe how we see Ymir. He's not some chaotic monster that has to be killed so that order can finally begin. No, in this view, Ymir is the order. He is raw, emergent, cosmological law given a body. He is life and law all rolled into one. And what happens to him, his so-called death, actually proves the point. When the gods kill him, he's not destroyed. He's partitioned. He's organized. His body literally becomes the world we live in. His flesh is the earth. His blood is the sea. You get the idea. This means Ymir, that primordial law, was never actually gotten rid of. He was just chopped up, distributed, and categorized. He is still right here, holding everything together. Well, that brings up a really interesting question, doesn't it? If Ymir is the law, and he wasn't really destroyed, then who exactly are the gods, the Aesir, who claim they won? What was their real job in all of this? Turns out they're basically administrators, middle management. They show up late to the party, and their main gig is to name things, to build walls, and to create different zones. They don't create the law, they just manage a reality that's already there. They take the natural consequences of Ymir's body, the cosmological law, and they rebrand it as a system of obedience to their commands. And this pattern isn't just a one-off thing in Norse mythology. We see the exact same structural idea, the same move of inversion and partition, popping up in the story of the Tower of Babel from a totally different culture.
The source argues that we usually get this story wrong. The real Senate babble wasn't just, pride or arrogance. It was that very specific claim: let us make a name for ourselves. See, that's a claim of authorship. It's the exact same move the Acer made. It's an attempt to say, we are the source of reality.
And what's the result? Partition, fragmentation. It's not just that people start speaking different languages. Our whole way of seeing the world gets shattered into these separate little boxes. Physics is over here, biology is way over there, law is its own separate thing. The world is no longer seen as this unified whole, as an echat, but as a messy collection of categories that are easier for administrators to manage. So what happens when these administrative systems, which are built on a fundamental lie, finally crash up against the reality they've tried to pave over? Well, that brings us to our last section, the true meaning of Ragnarok. The word itself tells you the real story. Ragnarok doesn't actually mean end of the world or twilight of the gods. When you break it down, Ragna means the ruling powers, and Rok means a reckoning and accounting. So it literally means the reckoning of the rulers. It's not a judgment on existence, it's a judgment on the administrators. So we really need to shift how we look at this. The common view, the Hollywood version, is this fiery apocalypse where everything ends. But the structural view we're exploring here sees it as an inevitable system correction. It's the collapse of a fake administrative layer that just can't hold back the primordial law anymore. It's reality simply reasserting itself. And judgment here has nothing to do with moral punishment. It's just exposure. It's what happens when a system is out of sync with reality. It's like a building with a flawed foundation. Eventually, gravity, the cosmological law, is going to win. The structure will fail. That failure is the judgment. Which brings us to this final thought. The great inversion is this constant attempt to replace what simply is with what is commanded. But as the source argues, reality doesn't need to fight back. It doesn't need to conquer anything. Because when all the fragile systems of command finally collapse under their own weight, the truth is what's left standing. It simply remains. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. What structures in our own world are built on this very same lie?